When I heard the high-pitched hum coming from the side of my cabin, I assumed it was just another cicada chorus rattling away in the trees. But then I saw the extension cord, bright orange, snaking across the gravel driveway, up the embankment, and directly into the charge port of a cherry-red Tesla parked like it owned the place. I stood there holding my morning coffee, blinking through the steam, trying to process the absurdity of it all. My off-grid cabin, powered by solar and a backup generator for emergencies, was being used as an unauthorized charging station by my neighbor's Tesla. A Tesla that, judging by the license plate frame which read, HOA powered, belonged to none other than Glenda Pearson, our HOA vice president and resident menace in a sun hat. I didn't scream. I didn't stomp. I simply walked up to the plug, unplugged it, and stood there sipping my coffee as the Tesla let out an indignant beep. Less than 30 seconds later, Glenda came marching down the hill in her peach tracksuit like she was storming Normandy. Her platinum blonde bob jiggled with every step and her face was already twisted into a practiced scowl of righteous fury. "Excuse me," she barked, arms flailing like she was signaling a plane to land. "That is a $90,000 vehicle you just unplugged." I raised an eyebrow and took another sip. Funny. I thought it was a parasite. That earned me a sharp inhale, the kind that precedes either a lawsuit or a stroke. She pointed a trembling finger at my solar panels. "You're generating more than you use. That's public energy overflow, and as a member of the Homeowners Association, I have every right to reclaim excess resources for the good of the community. Glenda, this is a private cabin outside HOA jurisdiction. You can't reclaim electricity that doesn't belong to you." Her face twitched. "I represent the community. And as such I broke onto private land, plugged in your overpriced battery on wheels, and now you're yelling at the owner for noticing. Got it." I smiled, calm as ever, and turned back toward my porch. "Charge somewhere else, Glenda. Or at least ask next time." But asking wasn't really her style. That evening, I came back from the local hardware store to find the Tesla parked even closer, the cord plugged in again, and a freshly laminated, Community Energy Share Zone sign staked proudly into my gravel. She wasn't just freeloading, she was marking territory. Now, to most people, this would have been the time to threaten legal action or call the sheriff. But I've always preferred the scenic route to revenge. It's longer, slower, and infinitely more satisfying. I didn't just want Glenda gone, I wanted her to feel every ounce of the entitlement she flung at everyone else come ricocheting back like a rubber band to the face. The first thing I did was reroute my outdoor outlet. Normally, it was hooked to my solar inverter, which was how she'd been charging. But I installed a bypass, one that sent the current through an old-school industrial bug zapper I had stashed in the shed. The kind meant for barns. Loud. Violent. The second you plug something in, it delivers a high-frequency jolt meant to drop wasps out of the air mid-flight. I tested it on a shovel first. The thing sparked like a small sun and left a burn mark on the handle. Perfect. I left the outlet live, the cord coiled beside it like a friendly invitation. Then I waited. She came the next afternoon. I watched from inside as she strutted down in wedge sandals, Starbucks cup in hand, and plugged in like she was doing me a favor. I counted 1, 2, 3 BZZT. There was a flash, a mechanical screech, and her Tesla let out a yelp that sounded far too human. Glenda jumped back, spilling her frappuccino all over her chest, flapping her arms like a spooked flamingo. She yanked the cord out and screamed something unintelligible, possibly in Latin, and stormed back up the hill. That should have been the end of it. But Glenda had the one trait that made her truly dangerous. She thought she was smarter than everyone else. The next morning, I found a legal notice duct-taped to my mailbox. Cease and desist. Energy hoarding. It was signed by the HOA president, a man named Roger Bigsby, who was really just a human sock puppet for Glenda's ambitions. According to the letter, my failure to contribute renewable energy to the community grid violated a clause in the HOA's environmental good neighbor policy. Never mind that my cabin wasn't in the HOA map boundaries. Never mind that there was no such policy filed at the county records office. She had invented a law and expected it to stick. So I paid a visit to my lawyer, a real one, not a Glenda-invented one. Then I paid a visit to the county clerk. And then, just for fun, I called the local news station. They didn't bite at first. But when I mentioned the phrase, illegal power siphoning from off-grid solar, their ears perked up. Especially when I added that the person in question was the HOA vice president known for sending out dozens of petty fines each year, including one to a wheelchair-bound veteran for leaving a garden hose unspooled. Within 3 days, the reporter and his camera guy were on my porch, asking me to walk them through the situation. I played it modest, of course. Just a peaceful cabin owner trying to protect his little slice of heaven. I even showed them the sign Glenda had staked and the extension cord, which still smelled faintly of burned plastic. They loved it. That night, the news segment aired during prime time. They called it Battle Over Backyard Power, and they made sure to blur Glenda's face, right up until she stepped into the frame herself to shout at the reporter for trespassing, inadvertently giving them a full front shot of her furious, frappuccino-stained self. It was beautiful. I figured the public embarrassment would finally cool her jet. But I underestimated how deep Glenda's ego ran. Because while most people would have laid low after local news exposure, Glenda's next move made everything before it look like a rehearsal. She called a special HOA meeting. Not just any meeting, one to vote on a proposed expansion of the HOA's jurisdiction. Her goal was to annex all the private properties bordering the neighborhood, including my cabin. That's when things got interesting. If there's one thing Karen loves more than her sense of authority, it's paperwork. Obsessive, bureaucratic, soul-crushing paperwork. So when I opened my mailbox and found a self-stamped packet titled, Founding Charter of the Willow Glen Property Integrity Association, I knew exactly whose desperate fingerprints were all over it. She had gone and made her own HOA. From scratch. With herself as interim executive chairwoman, whatever that meant. The paperwork included a newsletter, a bylaws booklet, a welcome packet, and, of course, a violation notice. For me. For intentional disruption of community wellness standards via animal-based entrapment. I stood on my porch, flipping through the documents like I was reading a menu in hell. She'd even included a hand-drawn map of our street, with my house circled in red ink and the word problem scribbled beside it. She had, apparently, convinced 4 of our more gullible neighbors, 3 retirees and a woman who thought the moon landing was fake, to sign on. That gave her just enough momentum to claim the whole block as a provisional governance zone. Which, to be clear, is not a real thing. But she made it sound real enough to scare the weak-willed. She put up signs at every corner. Welcome to Willow Glen, a community of standards. I passed one on the way to work, and it was crooked. The irony nearly caused a stroke. The next move came fast. I got a letter from the city claiming my house was under review for unregistered pet containment structures. Apparently, Karen had filed a complaint that I was illegally harboring wildlife. She even attached stills from the video of Marvin launching his fragrant vengeance. I couldn't decide if I was impressed or insulted. Fortunately, the city inspector turned out to be a reasonable guy. He came out, saw the totally Marvin-free property, rolled his eyes and laughed. "This the skunk lady house?" he asked. I nodded. "You're the 3rd one this week. She tried to cite a guy for having unlevel hedges." He stamped the complaint closed and told me if Karen escalated, I should consider legal action. I told him I was already 3 spreadsheets deep into planning my next move. Because Karen didn't stop. She never does. Like a Roomba with a vendetta, she just keeps bouncing off walls until she finds a crack. Her next stunt was what really set the neighborhood ablaze. Literally. I came home one afternoon to find a group of confused kids standing on my lawn next to a small table covered in pamphlet. Karen had set up an educational outreach booth on my property without asking. There was a banner: "Keep Willow Glen clean, say no to vermin-adjacent neighbors." A bowl of lemon water sat on the table, next to cookies shaped like little skunks with red excess over them. She was mid-speech when I walked up. "And some people think it's funny to use dangerous animals as weapons, but we know better, don't we?" The kids, all under 10, looked deeply uninterested. "Karen," I said evenly, "why are you on my lawn?" She turned with a smile so fake it should have come with a barcode. "Community outreach. Your front yard is the most visible location, and your lawn was so available. Did you just insult my landscaping? I'm offering constructive feedback. Get off my lawn. Children, let's all go do a safety walk," she chirped, herding them like confused ducklings toward the sidewalk. Once she was gone, I inspected the table. The cookies were from a store 3 blocks away, which she'd had delivered. Using my address, I made some calls. First to the bakery, where I confirmed the order had indeed been placed under the name Karen Whitmore, Community President, but billed and shipped to my house. Then to the neighborhood group chat, where I posted a photo of her outreach booth with the caption, "Today's lesson: never feed cookies to strangers without permission or legal standing." Reactions came fast. Laughing emojis. Eye roll memes. Then a neighbor posted their own story. Karen had left a warning notice on their door about unauthorized wind chimes. Another neighbor chimed in. She'd tried to ban Halloween decorations unless they were historically accurate. By evening, I had enough screenshots to build a digital library of her chaos. But then came the real twist. I got a call from an unknown number. The man on the other end introduced himself as Michael, Regional Director of Community Associations International. Apparently, Karen had attempted to register her HOA officially and was trying to rope in properties using falsified neighborhood maps and misleading voter tallies. "She claims you're her vice president," he said. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. "I put a skunk in a box to keep her out of my packages. That's our relationship." He sighed. "That's what I figured. She's crossed several lines. We're initiating a review." 2 days later, Karen hosted a town hall meeting in her backyard. Or tried to. She dragged folding chairs onto the lawn, set up a Bluetooth speaker on a card table, and stood beneath a canopy labeled Willow Glen United. Only 6 people showed up. 1 was her dog. 2 others were there for free bottled water. She shouted into the mic about order, safety, and the decay of neighborhood decency. I showed up 5 minutes in with a USB drive and a portable projector. I didn't say a word. Just plugged it into the speaker's power supply, pointed the projector at her garage door, and played a video compilation of Karen's greatest hit. Package theft, cookie propaganda, anti-wind chime rhetoric. Each clip was carefully captioned and timestamped. The neighbors gasped. One guy actually applauded. Karen froze mid-sentence. "This is an illegal broadcast," she shrieked. "It's called freedom of information," I replied. "Maybe read the Constitution before founding a fake government." That's when her mic cut out. Her Bluetooth speaker, plugged into the same outlet as my projector, shut down. I gave her a polite nod and walked away, leaving the footage playing. The fallout was immediate. The neighbors left. Someone unplugged the table fan she'd brought. Another woman took back the bottled water she'd donated. Karen stood in the middle of her lawn, clutching her mic like a defeated game show host whose audience had voted with their feet. But it wasn't over. That night I found my porch egged. Not teenage prank style, this was strategic. 1 egg on the doormat. 1 on the doorbell. 1 on the package camera lens. It was quiet. Precise. Personal. She was escalating again. No more rules, no more fake bylaws. This was war. And if she wanted chaos, I was more than ready to give it to her. Because I had a delivery coming in the next morning, one she wouldn't dare touch. A package so foul, so hilarious, so undeniably me, it would bring this saga to a glorious boil. And for the first time, I was going to sign it with her name. I stood staring at the blackened breaker box, the wires curled like overcooked spaghetti, the plastic fused into a toxic mess. The air stank of ozone and spite. I didn't need to look far to know who was responsible. This wasn't a squirrel or a lightning strike. This was targeted, intentional, and sloppy. Glenda had finally crossed from petty tyrant to criminal arsonist, though I doubted she even realized it. The woman probably thought she was just sending a message, the same way a toddler sends a message by smearing peanut butter on the walls. I didn't call the cop. Not because I was afraid or uncertain, but because I already knew the game Glenda was playing. In her world, the person who makes the loudest accusation always wins. If I reported the damage now, she'd spin it into a narrative about me being unstable, erratic, dangerous, whatever word fit best into her cocktail of HOA-coded fearmongering. No, if I was going to hit back, I needed a play that was bigger, cleaner, and final. So I called Randy. Randy is the kind of guy who can look at a pile of melted wiring and say, "Yeah, I can fix that. Want me to upgrade it while I'm at it?" He's also the kind of guy who carries 3 different sizes of bolt cutters in the back of his truck and once installed a backup generator using nothing but 2 flashlights and a YouTube tutorial in German. He's not flashy. He's not chatty. But he's brilliant. I told him I needed the entire box rewired, plus a covert breaker setup that only I could access. And while we were at it, I asked if he could help me set up something creative. He raised an eyebrow. Creative how? Like, if someone tries to plug into my cabin again, they'll regret it. Not permanently. Just enough to learn a lesson. He grinned. We're talking psychological warfare. Exactly. Randy got to work that same afternoon. By sunset, the entire cabin had a hidden backup system running through a buried line with its own lockbox and grounding switch. But the real piece de resistance was the outlet trap. We wired a decoy outlet on the exterior wall, the exact one Glenda had been using before. Except this time, it didn't connect to power. It connected to a modified bug zapper transformer, disguised inside a dummy breaker that activated only when more than 15 volts of current tried to pull. Enough to fry a charger, scare the driver, and trip a camera I'd rigged just above it. It took 3 days for Glenda to try again. The Tesla pulled up just before dusk. I watched from inside, lights dimmed, as she stepped out wearing another matching tracksuit ensemble, this time navy blue with rhinestones spelling "Boss Lady" across the back. She looked both ways like a cartoon burglar, then strutted over and shoved the cord into the outlet. Zzzzkrak. The zap was short but sharp, like someone firing a taser at a microwave. The charger cable sparked and the Tesla shrieked in protest. Glenda leapt back, clutching her wrist and screaming something that was probably meant to be English but came out as a high-pitched gargle of betrayal. I snapped a photo through the window. Her face was priceless, eyes wide, mouth open, one shoe missing. She scrambled to her car, snatched up the cord like it had personally insulted her, and took off, tires squealing against gravel. I didn't post the footage right away. That would have been too easy. Instead, I made an anonymous submission to a Facebook group Glenda had started herself, "Our Neighborhood, Our Rules." The caption was simple. Maybe don't steal power from off-grid cabins if you don't know how electricity works. The post went semi-viral within the HOA circle. Not global internet famous, but famous enough that it made the rounds at the local bake sale and HOA bingo night. Comments poured in. Some people laughed. Some expressed concern. But almost all of them recognized Glenda's Tesla. She'd wrapped it in a custom decal that said Glenergy on the sides, like she was running a mobile green energy brand. So when her car was spotted mid-arc spark in a post labeled Karma in Action, her brand took a hit. She responded, of course. First with denial, claiming the video was deep-faked. Then with righteous fury, threatening legal action against whoever was spreading dangerous misinformation. But her worst move came when she filed a formal complaint with the county sheriff, who, unfortunately for her, had already seen the video and was not amused. I was called in for questioning. The officer, a middle-aged man named DeSantis with a salt and pepper mustache and a deadpan sense of humor, reviewed the footage and asked if I'd like to press charges instead. For property damage or trespassing? I asked. He gave a shrug. Both. And maybe attempted theft of utilities. I shook my head. Not yet. I'm playing the long game. He smiled. Well, if you change your mind, you've got friends in the department. A lot of folks around here are tired of her crap. That was the moment I realized Glenda didn't just make enemies, she manufactured them. Everyone she bullied, fined, or power-tripped over the past 5 years was quietly cheering me on. They just hadn't been able to push back. But I wasn't part of their HOA. I didn't answer to their rules. And that made me the perfect pressure valve. I decided it was time for one last move. Not an escalation. A finale. I hosted a neighborhood cookout. Not on my property, but at the public lakefront just outside the HOA boundary. I rented a few picnic tables, brought in a grill, and casually mentioned to a few neighbors that I'd be serving smoked brisket and solar-chilled beer, powered by the same system Glenda had tried to hijack. The invitations spread like wildfire. More than 50 people showed up. Families, veterans, retirees, even some HOA board members who were, technically, just passing by. I gave a short speech, thanked everyone for coming, made a joke about renewable justice. Then, as the sun set behind the lake, I unveiled a small art piece I'd commissioned, a welded metal sculpture of a Tesla charger plugged into a bug zapper, mounted on a wooden base that read, "To Glenda, with love." The crowd lost it. People clapped, laughed, took photos. A few even asked if they could chip in to make copies. I saw Glenda's son lurking near the edge of the gathering, filming it all on his phone with wide eyes. No doubt it would find its way to her. But Glenda didn't show. Not that night. Not the next day. Not for a week. Then the final twist landed. A notice appeared in every HOA mailbox, an emergency announcement stating that Glenda Pearson had officially resigned from the board due to ongoing personal matters. It didn't say what kind. It didn't have to. Everyone already knew. I heard she sold the Tesla 2 days later. Traded it in for a beige Lexus SUV. No custom decals. No extension cords. She still lives up the hill, but now she takes the long way around to avoid my driveway. She's stopped speaking in board meeting voice and has taken up pottery, according to Mrs. Langley. As for me, my cabin's never been more peaceful. The solar system hums along quietly, powering my tools, fridge, and passive-aggressive garden lights. I still keep Randy's rigged outlet box installed, just in case. But these days, it's more of a monument than a trap. A reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't fire or fury. It's one perfectly timed zap. It would have been easy to say the saga ended there, that Glenda finally backed off after the sculpture, the cookout, and her sudden resignation. For a while, it even felt that way. The neighborhood calmed. My breaker box stayed intact. No new extension cords slithered across my driveway. And even the birds seemed to chirp more harmoniously, as if the HOA's oppressive aura had finally lifted like a storm cloud. But peace, as I've learned, often precedes the next escalation. It lulls you into false security, making the first crack in the dam that much more dramatic when it bursts. The warning sign came in the form of a realtor's flyer. I found it in my mailbox one bright Monday morning, glossy, oversized, and clearly expensive. On the front was a high-resolution photo of Glenda standing in front of a row of modern townhomes, arms crossed like a proud general. The flyer read, "Pearson Properties, Reimagining Your Community." In the bottom corner, in much smaller print, was a logo that matched her infamous Tesla decal. Glenergy, repurposed now into some kind of real estate and utilities hybrid brand. I stared at it for a good 30 seconds, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. The back of the flyer explained everything. Glenda had launched a green development initiative, buying land parcels just outside the HOA boundaries to create an eco-conscious planned community. The pitch was laced with buzzwords: sustainable, inclusive, net zero, smart hub. But beneath the organic paint and solar fluff was the real play. She was buying land. Lots of it. Including parcels within a mile of my cabin. Now, I'm not against development. Progress is inevitable. What I am against is watching someone who just tried to annex my land and fry my wiring come within spitting distance of my property line, armed with a new title, a new logo, and undoubtedly a new grudge. So I started researching. It didn't take much digging to find her LLC filings, all under Glenda's name. Pearson Properties, Glenergy Development Group. She'd registered both only a few weeks after stepping down from the HOA. The timing wasn't subtle. This wasn't a new direction. This was a pivot. Same control complex, new packaging. But here's the thing about off-grid property owners like me: we tend to know every inch of our land. And we especially know the lines, both legal and literal. One of the first things I did after buying the cabin was walk the entire perimeter with a GPS and get my boundaries certified by a surveyor. I had files, photos, coordinates. I even had a drone flyover from last year when I was planning a fire break. That's why, 2 weeks after getting Glenda's flyer, I noticed something off. A flag stake appeared about 50 feet beyond my northern fence line. Then another. Orange ribbon, survey tape fluttering in the breeze. At first glance, it could have been utility markers, until I spotted the temporary site sign: Future Glenergy Welcome Center, permitting in progress. She wasn't just expanding. She was trying to build right next to me. Practically on top of me. The kicker? That land wasn't supposed to be for sale. It belonged to an elderly man named Mr. Beaudry, a war veteran who'd inherited it from his father and kept it wild as a personal sanctuary. Everyone in the area knew he wasn't interested in selling, especially not to HOA type. But Glenda had found a loophole. Beaudry had recently been moved to assisted living. His daughter, who lived out of state, had power of attorney and was handling his affairs. Glenda must have seen her as an easy mark. Quick sale, quick signature, no local context. The land went up for private development lease, just days before the ribbons appeared. I drove straight to the permitting office. The clerk, a tired-looking woman with glasses and a half-finished energy drink, barely looked up until I dropped the parcel map and pointed at the flagged boundary. "Is there an active permit request for this zone?" She typed for a moment. "Yeah. One application pending review. Glenergy. Looks like a community center with commercial utility nodes and a small parking area. Green tech hub, whatever that means. It means my property's about to get boxed in by a bunch of solar panels and smug signage." She smirked. "If the application's bad, you can file an objection. Public hearings in 10 days. I nodded slowly. "Can I also file an environmental impact concern?" "Sure," she said, passing me a form. "And if you've got any footage of native wildlife or documentation of local use, that helps a lot." Oh, did I ever. Over the next 8 days, I assembled what could only be described as a cinematic takedown. Drone footage of wild turkeys roosting in the trees. Time-lapse clips of foxes crossing the glade. A spreadsheet of seasonal migrations from a local birdwatcher. Even a video of Mr. Beaudry himself, recorded just last year, explaining why he refused to let anyone build on his land. I stitched it all into a clean presentation, complete with maps, timestamps, and an affidavit from the birdwatcher confirming the area was a key habitat. But I didn't stop there. With Randy's help, I installed a short-range acoustic monitoring sensor by the flagged area. Within 3 nights it captured 3 different Tesla vehicles rolling up to the site, dumping construction materials in the brush under cover of night, an early start before the permit cleared. All traceable. All time-stamped. The night before the hearing, I received a hand-delivered letter, No postage, just tape sealed and slipped into my cabin door. Inside was a note, handwritten in elegant cursive. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Let it go, or things will get unpleasant. G. It was classic Glenda, passive-aggressive, theatrical, and veiled just enough to skirt legal consequence. I scanned it, logged it, and locked it in a folder titled, "In Case She Really Loses It." The public hearing took place at the county hall. 100 folding chairs, a large map board, and a panel of 5 sleepy officials who clearly didn't want to be there. But they perked up when I took the floor and played the footage. The Tesla headlights in the woods, the acoustic readouts, the wildlife drone clip, and finally, the signed letter from Mr. Beaudry's daughter, rescinding the lease under the claim that she'd been misled by a former HOA official posing as a community sustainability expert. Glenda was there, seated 2 rows behind me, arms folded, lips drawn into a pale, frozen line. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The way her face drained when the footage played said everything. The panel thanked me. Then they denied the permit. Unanimously. It wasn't just a loss for Glenda, it was a public rejection. A ceremonial dethroning. Pearson Properties' entire debut project, killed in the cradle. By the end of the week, all the flags were gone. The site sign disappeared. Glenda's new website for the Welcome Center redirected to a blank page. And then came the real cherry on top. I got a call from a local nonprofit. They'd seen the footage from the hearing, heard about the land, and wanted to talk. 2 weeks later, I helped them purchase the Beaudry parcel as a conservation easement. Protected. Untouchable. Forever. Glenda had tried to build next to me. Instead, she funded a wildlife preserve. Sometimes the universe writes the punchline for you. Spring rolled in quietly that year, with the kind of soft, forgiving weather that makes you forget anyone ever tried to hijack your solar power or pave over a fox den. The air was crisp. The wildflowers bloomed in thick yellow clusters across the conservation land next to my cabin. And for once, I had nothing to defend. The signs marking the new Beaudry conservation easement had gone up the week before, right along the trail that now looped through the property. It wasn't a major public park, just a humble, protected patch of wilderness with educational markers, a small solar-powered trail cam for birdwatchers, and a bench made from repurposed barn wood. I installed that one myself, carved a small line into it with a woodburner, preserve what fights to stay wild. The best part? Every time Glenda came or went from her hilltop house, she had to drive right past it. I didn't see much of her anymore. No more Tesla sightings. No more flyers. No more threats wrapped in passive-aggressive cursive. She still lived in the neighborhood, but it was like she'd evaporated from the daily circuit. Neighbors stopped mentioning her. Even Roger, her old puppet president, had apparently moved to Florida. I heard he started a koi pond and joined a wine club. But the thing about people like Glenda is they never truly disappear. They simmer. They seethe. They bide their time until they can claw their way back with something new. So while I enjoyed the quiet, I never let myself get too comfortable. I kept a charged drone in my cabin, checked the power systems weekly, installed motion-sensitive trail cams. Not because I was paranoid, but because I'd earned this peace the hard way. And then one afternoon, it happened. I got a knock on the cabin door. Now, that's not unusual. Occasionally a hiker will wander off-trail or a neighbor will stop by to return tools, but when I opened the door and saw Glenda standing there with a clipboard and a forced smile, I felt that old spark of caution snap awake like a tripwire. She looked different. Not humbled. Not contrite. But controlled. Like someone who'd been to a seminar on emotional regulation and took detailed note. Her usual color-coordinated tracksuit had been replaced by khakis and a button-down blouse, her hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun that didn't quite hide the tension in her jaw. "Hi," she said, as if the last 12 months hadn't happened. "Do you have a minute?" I didn't move. Just leaned against the doorframe. "Not unless this is a confession or a formal apology." She gave a clipped chuckle. Actually, I came to make you an offer. Oh good. My favorite kind of unsolicited nonsense. Please, come ruin my afternoon. She ignored the jab and held out the clipboard. I'm partnering with a nonprofit, Clean Earth Coalition. We're launching a solar data initiative, measuring off-grid efficiency in rural and semi-rural communities. Grants, recognition, federal case studies. Your setup is one of the most efficient systems in the county. We'd like to include your cabin. I blinked. For a moment, it almost sounded like flattery. Then I read the fine print. Participation gave them non-exclusive access to monitor my energy data. A representative could do periodic site visits to verify performance metrics. Any upgrades or malfunctions would be subject to collaborative review. In other words, she couldn't annex me, so now she was trying to Trojan horse her way in through a clipboard and corporate buzzwords. You think if you wrap surveillance in enough green jargon, I'll let you hardwire a leash to my solar panels? I asked. Her smile thinned. This is a serious opportunity, not just for you, but for the community. You're sitting on a case study goldmine, and you don't even realize it. Oh, I realize a lot. Like the fact you used to call my cabin a blight. Or the time you tried to reclaim my energy. Or when your Tesla charger shorted out because you didn't understand amperage. Her cheeks flushed. That was never. And then there was the time you tried to build a welcome center on protected wildlife land. You're batting 1,000. Her voice dropped an octave. This isn't personal. I've changed. I'm working with new people. I'm trying to build something real. You don't build something real by faking a public interest. You do it by shutting up and planting trees. She stepped back. So that's it? You won't even consider being part of something larger than yourself. Not if you're involved. Not if it comes with strings. Not if I have to sign anything that puts you within 50 feet of my breaker box again. There was a long pause. And then, for the first time since this war started, Glenda actually looked tired. Not defeated, just hollow. Like someone whose grand plan had collapsed so many times that even she was starting to see the pattern. I really thought, she said softly, that you'd want to do something meaningful. I already did, I said. I stopped you. She stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked back down the gravel path. No parting shot. No dramatics. Just silence. That night, I poured a glass of bourbon, sat out on my porch, and watched the stars come out over the woods. I thought about everything that had happened, the extension cord, the bug zapper, the fake violation letters, the cookout, the conservation win. I'd been dragged into a petty, ridiculous war, and somehow come out with more than I started with. But victory in these things doesn't come with applause. It comes with stillness, with boundaries respected, with the rare privilege of being left alone. The next morning, I mailed a copy of Glenda's data collection form to the State Consumer Ethics Board with a note. You may want to ask how she's funding this. A week later, I heard from Marla, my attorney. Glenda's nonprofit had been flagged for audit. Apparently, someone had discovered that the Clean Earth Coalition shared an office lease with her old HOA's bookkeeping firm. Suspicious. Maybe criminal. Definitely poetic. Last I heard, Glenda pulled the plug on the project. Again. No press release. No ribbon cutting. Just another half-baked empire shelved in her garage between old yard signs and a defunct Tesla charger. Meanwhile, the Beaudry conservation land is thriving. A local school uses the trails for biology field trip. A retired botanist started cataloging rare plants in the region. There's even talk of adding a small observation deck for stargazing. And me? I'm still here. Still off-grid. Still sipping coffee every morning, watching deer pass through the treeline like they own the place. Which, in a way, they do. The outlet trap is still installed, though I haven't had to use it again. I keep it for sentimental reasons. A monument to absurdity. A reminder that sometimes the smartest thing you can do is wait. Watch. and wire the outlet to a bug zapper. Glenda may try again one day. People like her don't change, they just rebrand. But if she does, I'll be ready. Because this isn't just a cabin. It's a line in the sand. And nobody crosses it twice.